We have a great guest coming up next, Luke. All right.
Let's bring him in now. This gentleman has not fought in some time, but of course he's a UFC legend. He's a former UFC heavyweight champion, plus a whole lot more.
He's a living legend. Say it.
Joins us from Sin City himself. It's the one and only Frank Mir. Hi, Frank. How are you?
Oh, great, Luke. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Frank. You are in Las Vegas, correct?
Yep. I was out there. Actually, Brian, you were just out here, right? You came off the fight?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. By the way, did you watch the Gervonta and Ryan Garcia fight? If so, any thoughts?
Yeah, I actually was surprised it was so one-sided. I thought that, until the body shot ended, he just came out too hard, too strong. At first, it being too conservative, and then on the other side of it, just kind of opened up and just, I think people do that sometimes with bad game planning, and instead they overcompensate instead of just sitting there going, hey, man, play short ball. I'm behind, but let me still just get on first. Let me get on second, to use a baseball analogy for fighting. Sometimes guys think the behind in fights are not doing well, and they compensate. And that's why I think he's so open for that body shot that just finally took him out.
Well, listen, we were told that you have an announcement here. So let's just give you the floor and you tell us what's going on in your life. And then, of course, we're going to have some questions about it. But by all means, please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, everybody knows that I'm a big part of the UFL. And we were doing some big things there, making sure fighters have insurance, a part of stake in the company, just really taking care of fighters and just trying to improve the things that we thought that could be improved in the sport. And then, my daughter, obviously, my children have been following in my footsteps. She just recently won a national title for the was it U19? So now she's going to possibly compete in Worlds, but which is causing a bit of a scheduling conflict with us because as of right now, we're fighting together on our August card for UFL. We're going to do a father-daughter. She's in corner me while I fight. I corner her while she fights. As of right now, I prefer she fought first, but she might be the bigger star, so who knows.
So let's back up a step here. So this is going to be what day?
May 13th. Excuse me, there's our next fight coming up, but August 12th. And let me make sure I say that correctly. Yeah, in August 12th, we're going to fight in UFL. It'll be, so far, it looks like it'll be in Phoenix.
Now, you haven't fought in 4 years. Is this your retirement bout? How are you positioning this one?
Yeah, basically, it's one of those things that I basically have almost transitioned into full coaching mode now. It's funny when you're a younger fighter, you see guys retire, you're like, oh, why? And they lose. It's like, well, no, it's not even so much that you're not physically capable anymore. Just getting up in the morning hurts worse and worse. I mean, I think most people that have a 19 in their year bracket understand what it feels like to wake up in the morning, and then you add some of the miles that I put on my body. So it just makes it difficult, and the sacrifice to reward. And so I find it really rewarding right now to be coaching other people, to be helping out with my daughter and my sons. And my mind still wants to go out there and just do one last competition for MMA, and so this probably will be the last time I'll ever fight as a martial artist. I want to finish with an MMA fight, and then fighting on the same card with Bella. Having my daughter, and we've been throwing around, and this is really just early talks, because my 17-year-old's already won state each year now in high school, and he's 210 pounds, and he's trains with me, and he's like, oh, maybe I can start doing an amateur fight. I'm like, maybe we make it a whole night. Quentin's son Raj is going to be on the card that night, so make it a family affair.
All right, so again, this will be August 12th. You'll be fighting on the same card as your daughter. Now, do you have an opponent named yet?
No, not yet. A couple ideas are thrown on the board, as far as what to do. Obviously, trying to get just everything just lined up perfectly, and for me being on this side of it, I realize it's a little bit more difficult than just showing up, at the weigh-ins and fighting. So we're actually in progress. It's a work in progress right now, looking at different opponents right now of who's, not signed, who's capable of coming over, and and not going to be just a one-sided fight. Even though I'll be 44 by the time the fight comes on. Running into positions or problems with the commission saying that what about this guy? They're like, man, your records are way too. There's too much disparity in experience, and so it makes it difficult for matching up as you get older.
Frank, I gotta say as well, and I say this with love because we were born in the same year. We're both born in 1979. Hey, you're old, Frank.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you talk about getting up and feeling it, buddy, I know. I don't know exactly how you feel, but I kind of know how you feel. In general, though, can you give us a state of your health? You did have by the way, of course, for folks who've been watching a long time, you had that motorcycle accident back in 04. It's been some time. You made your MMA debut before 9/11. I mean, that's how long you've been in this one, a long time ago. How do you feel these days?
I'm actually feeling really good now, just because training for a fight is not a healthy thing. You get hurt, you get injured, you have timelines and dates that you have to stay obligated to. And so you push through things and create injuries. And now that I haven't had to do that for a while, I've actually have a pretty healthy body. My biggest injury was actually the last one I had probably about a year and a half ago. I had to have my neck repaired, lost the function of my arm for a little bit. That was bad. And I thought that was going to finish me, but now I've been back in the gym. For the last 6 months, my strength has completely returned in the arm, and now there's no difference, And so that was kind of the start of the conversation. It was 6 months ago. I started jumping back in the gym, sparring, wrestling, rolling with people on top of coaching. And I was like, I feel really good. I'm sharper than everybody here. I know more than, understand the movements and flows and patterns and traps. But I didn't think my body would hold up, and it has. Now, that being said, is it going to hold up to a whole fight camp? I think it can if I just approach it very intelligently, realizing like sparring, 3 or 4 times a week is probably not going to be useful for me. But at the same time, I'm 44 years old. I don't need to spar 4 or 5 times a week to stay sharp. I've seen punches. There's going to be just different ways for me to train and approach things. And being in the weight room for 2 hours, that's not going to be beneficial for me. Going in there for 45 minutes of training and then doing a lot of rehab. I just have to approach my training differently in a way that realize, okay, I heal slower.
Sure.
Go ahead, BC.
Frank, when the three of us were young, Griffey Jr. and Sr. in the same lineup was like the coolest story we'd ever seen. You see LeBron openly saying, I want to hang around and play in the same lineup as my son Bronny in a year or two. When did this idea birth to corner your kids, they corner you, fight on the same card, sort of have that really cool moment that is, the real calling card to this event in August?
Well, my kids have always loved the sport of martial arts, it's the endeavor, it's a lifestyle, and I've made all my children train. Never with the expectations to ever be a professional fighter. I think it's like being a musician, the love of music is a great thing, but to sit there and go, hey, we're going to go ahead and put all our eggs in this basket that we're going to plan on being a professional musician and make a living as a rock star. Even if you've made it as a rock star, you realize that, injuries happen, all kinds of things that are out of your control. And so as a parent, I really didn't want this lifestyle for my children.
Sure.
And then the more it went along, especially with Isabella, she was heading face first into it, she loves violence. She loves aggressiveness. She was playing football at Gorman on the freshman football team and playing and starting. At a certain point, I just told her, I'm like, hey, look, biology is going to take over. You're a female, and you're not going to be able to compete with men on this level. And then wrestling really helped take over for her, because she could sit there and go, okay, well, now there's an area that I can go ahead and compete at and be on the same platform with men, and it doesn't, it doesn't become an issue. So then, because of the sport of, Rhonda helping the female aspect of our sport take off, it became an opportunity where I was like, well, now she could make a living at this and make a better living than I did at the time, because of what, opportunities have now been granted. And so I jumped on board. I was like, all right, well, she's really going to run face first into this. I can either be a part of this trip and traveling with her, or I can, I sit on the sideline and watch. So obviously I wanted to be a part of it and help her, guide her, and make sure that she doesn't make the same mistakes I did. And then as far as, that's why I had her corner me at first. I was like, you really think you want to do this? Let's walk down to a cage once,
Sure.
Let's, with a family member, someone you love is about to fight. You think that sucks, let's put you in the pressure. She handled it. And so then her wrestling is taken up at such a high level. Her wrestling at Iowa, being a national champion. And she's 3-0 in MMA. So we got her some fights. She succeeded and did very well. And so now it's like, the writing's on the wall. And so then the conversation was like, wow, if I could just hold on for a little bit and just have one more fight, what would that be like to be able to say that we fought on the same night, that we were both in the locker room together, both with our hands wrapped? Because so far we've done that. Now we've both cornered each other. But each time it's one of us wrapped up, ready to go. The other one is just a support role. And here's a situation where we'll both be in the back, hands wrapped up, supporting each other, but at the same time, both be going out there competing.
And your wife said yes to this, Frank?
Yeah. My daughter can be very convincing.
There you go. There you go.
Wife, so.
Hey, I got a question on the other side of things, which is that, what are Bella's wrestling coaches saying about the MMA participation?
Well, when she first started talking to Iowa about going up, it was very much made clear that, hey, look, this is part of Bella's life. Obviously we're going to push, wrestling and be devoted to it, but over the summers, she's still going to fight. And so fighting once or twice a year has pretty much been the plan from the get-go. So this is her freshman year, and wrestling season, she has her last, actually, the U.S. Open Senior Nationals is this weekend. She's in town. Well, she will be in town tonight to compete this weekend. And this will actually, I think, be her last wrestling event. And then she ends school in May. And then, Bella won't take any time off. She doesn't listen to me. She's going to go right into training. She trains like insanely hard, which scares me because I see some of the, I see some of the writing on the wall where I'm like, look, you got to slow down a little bit. Your body, we're still mortal. But, Bella's so eager and so driven. She's one of the most, I've actually had to have conversations with some of the coaches where you can't test Bella. If you sit there and go, hey, we're all going to go into a sauna, the last one out wins. I'm like, she'll die. You'll kill her. She won't leave the sauna. Like, she's just that mentally driven to prove a point. I don't know if watching me when she was younger and then seeing that now she wants to surpass whatever image she had of me. I'm like, well, Bella, you're already on the trajectory to do so. But the mental toughness that my children have is just unreal, to really a detriment.
Wow.
And so, timelines when she's come out, with the wrestling, it's been that as long as we fight over the summer, school starts again. This one, I wanted to have the fight closer in July, but just, scheduling wise, we just weren't able to make that work. So we're pushing all the way to August. So she might the first week of school might be a little bit rough for her, but juggling the both. And then now with the world team that she just made for wrestling, we're just compounding a little bit more of a juggling act.
How far can she go in wrestling? I mean, I realize I'm asking, I know you're biased, right? Obviously, because of, we all, I have a daughter, she's not wrestling. She's only 3, but, I can understand how you might have a rosy picture of it, but it sounds like, as I understand it too, she has an NIL deal as well through this whole process. But how far, let's say she really wanted to just focus on wrestling, how far do you think she could go?
I think she'll be the Olympic champion.
Wow.
I mean, she's won nationals on the high school level. She's won now national. She's the national champion as a freshman in college.
Would you? How do you see your role? Do you see your role as, hey, I'll help you go as far as whatever you want, or are you trying to steer her one direction or the other?
I just want her to be happy. So it's funny, we sit in the room and you say that, right? Her mother was more, wrestling doesn't pay any money. Why go that direction? We can still get hurt, get injured. If you're going to expose your body to damage, let's get compensated for it. Where I just sat there and asked Bella, well, what do you want to do? And Bella's, I want to fight, obviously. I want to be a world champion, and surpass every record you ever had. She's like, but I want to go win an Olympic gold medal. I'm like, all right, well, I think you're going to have to focus on the wrestling first a little bit more, and we'll come back and focus on the fighting afterwards. We can, but it isn't like she's focusing on boxing and all of a sudden we have 10 months out of the year and then we have a fight, an MMA fight. That would be a difficult transition. The fact that 10 months out of the year she's focused on wrestling and she's in wrestling shape, college level at Iowa, and then I have 6 to 8 weeks to go and prepare her for an MMA fight, makes it fairly easy.
In terms of your career, getting back to it, Frank, I've been watching it for a long time, man. I remember the redemptive moment against Anthony Hardonk. I remember your face. I remember you walking up and being like, who am I? I'm the man. I remember the whole thing. But looking back on it, did you accomplish everything you wanted to? You certainly hit some real high watermarks. I'm curious as to your perspective on, now that you look back on it, how it all went for you.
No, actually, sometimes, and that's actually one of the reasons why I've now really stuck myself in a coaching role. And there's sometimes, honestly, I get a little bit depressed because I think, man, if I had been my own coach, what I know now, because I mean, let's face it, I think until 2008, or 2005, my head coach was a gi jiu-jitsu guy. You know what I mean? That's unheard of now in the MMA world. In the 2000s, I didn't have anybody who actually fought MMA. At that time, there wasn't enough guys, or I wasn't exposed to them that were coaching MMA. I was having a boxing guy that had never done anything in that world, to help me with boxing, and a wrestling guy helped me with wrestling, and it was always kind of left up to me to figure out, put it together. I don't even think I started sparring MMA until 2009. where like actually before that it was kickboxing and then jiu-jitsu rounds and then you go fight. And I thought that I was absurd. I'm like, wow, I feel like an NFL player that the first time I get to play tackle football is on Sunday. And the rest of the week, you know, we're playing flag or we're playing, you know, line drills, but we never actually put pads on and hit and do the full roll until the game night. And so obviously now the training is such at a high level, and my understanding of the sport is much more accomplished than anybody that I had worked with, you know, 20 years ago. I always say that, man, if I could be my own coach 20 years ago, no one could have beat me with my athleticism. Nope, I would have been undefeated for many years. The resolution I have to that, though, is I'm like, oh, well, I have three descendants. My three children are very much have all my athletic ability and more. And even much more mental toughness. And now I can go ahead and see what I could have done with me as a coach. So I get to see now, oh, okay, what could I have done had I had better coaching, you know, better instructions. And nothing against, again, if any of my old coaches are watching, it's not against them, just everybody was new to the sport then. It was such a new sport that there wasn't a lot of guys. I mean, I think the Milicic team, you know, that had guys that were coaching that were MMA guys. You know, there was very few at the time. You'd watch guys walk. I could sit here, we could watch fights now. I could watch guys walk. I'm like, okay, you see this guy's corner? Not one of those cornermen has ever fought an MMA fight. Then they're cornering and coaching. Like, does that make any sense to you that you have no understanding? Be like, imagine if I said, hey, did you see this football player? Yeah, he came over from rugby. He's never played football down in his life, and now he's going to be the head coach. That would be absurd in that sport.
Yeah, absolutely. Frank, I was a Frank Mir super fan ever since you gave Wes Sims what he had coming right there. And you know, I'm a sucker for emotional redemptive wins. Luke mentioned the Hardonk win. I'll never forget the feeling as a fan when you stopped Big Nog at UFC 92 with punches, and it's the first time he'd been stopped. And I know you would go on to submit him, which was, you know, just as big, if not bigger in a lot of ways. But particularly that 2008 win, man, that just seemed like there was a lot coming out of you in that celebration. When you look back on that, what was sort of the mental journey you had going through that?
Well, it was a lot of redemption because I really had given up on myself at that point in my life. It's still actually emotional to me to think about because, you know, after I got into the motorcycle accident in 2004, I was a heavyweight champ of the world. I got my leg broken. Obviously, the UFC sat around for about a year before they took the title away from me, you know, which was probably longer than I even deserved with the injuries that I had. It didn't look like I was ever going to fight. And then when I did come back, they were ugly. You know, the fights I won looked like shit, lost fights. And so pretty much the Anthony Hardonk fight was emotional because I was, you know, before that fight, I was basically giving my walking papers. Like, hey, if you don't go out there and look like winning doesn't matter at this point. If you don't look like what you used to look like, you're done. And then go back and from that, work through, submit Lesnar, and then come back and then fight Nogueira, who at the time was considered a much better fighter. You know, was, you know, the Pride champion, and people considered him number 1, number 2 in the world, you know. And so to run through that gauntlet and overcome the fears and just the doubts I had in my own mind, you know, I was battling myself that night, you know, and just, I didn't think coming through on the other side of that, like, was like, wow, you know, you can accomplish these things.
Well, you look like Marvin Hagler that night against him. I mean, just the fact that he'd never been stopped and had almost a zombie-like chin, like, you had to be like, oh shit, I'm not just like back. I just tapped Lesnar and knocked out Big Nog. I mean, that's pretty, that must have been something huge in that moment.
No, that was a good peak in my life. You know, definitely maybe realized that, like, oh, you know, with the proper training and everything put together, that I can accomplish big things. And I think also too, just the hole that I was in before that, really digging out of it to reach such heights even made it more. You know, it's kind of coming out of Grand Canyon and then climbing Mount Everest, you know, it's like a double accomplishment because of how far back I basically started.
Frank, Joe Silva once had a great quote about you. This was in your prime, and he said, Frank Mir is what happens when technique meets horsepower. And we don't see a ton of heavyweights these days who are really submission-oriented. So I'm going to give you a challenge here. You are allowed to put yourself on the list, okay? You are allowed to do it. In fact, I think it'd be kind of weird if you didn't. But give me your Mount Rushmore, your top 4 submission heavyweights, submission-oriented heavyweights. Who do you think belongs on that list?
Oh, I think Nogueira, you know, myself, and then Verdum, you know, and then I would still put Barnett on there also. You know, I think that Josh also is very good at submissions as a heavyweight.
Do you feel like it's weird? Heavyweights have kind of changed a little bit. I mean, there are some that are out there doing that kind of thing, but we had a weird era, right? Where there was like a bunch of guys competing all at once who could do that. I wonder why we don't see as much of it these days.
I think the rules too in the sport sometimes is just a few, just we don't really favor seeing guys roll on the ground, you know. In fact, you know, like, here's an example of bias. If you were to fight me, Luke, and you take me down and you're my guard, and you want to stay there and you want to work, and I just wrap your arms and I look up at the referee, I'm essentially the one stalling. You know, you're not able to move. I tied you up. I'm not doing a really offensive movement. I'm just stalling you. I've clinched you up, basically like a boxer clinching up in a fight, in a boxing match. I'm very obviously the one stalling the action as the bottom guy, because I want to get rewarded. And sure enough, I'm rewarded. Instead of being docked, you know, points for stalling and being told to open up, to move, the referee stops the fight, or he starts the guy up in neutral, and gives the guy reward for stalling, for making the fight. You know, and it shows that, like, well, we want you guys to stand. You know, why stand there? Why not go give me a position? Let me pay. If you're going to stall, then I get to go past your legs. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that would then increase the action on the ground. It's like, all right, well, watch. Let me move to half guard now. You know what I mean? But it shows where the mental bias is, that because to understand MMA, you have to know grappling. You have to compete in jiu-jitsu or wrestling to understand what's going on in the grappling aspects of our sport. It's not intuitive. You can't sit there and go, well, that guy has his legs wrapped around here. What's going on? Well, why is that guy grabbing that guy's wrist? Boxing is extremely scientific, but you can watch a boxing match. You can bring a date. You can bring a family member that has no idea about angles, about fakes, about traps, nothing, lines of attack. They just watch two guys in their mind just punch each other in the face. Like, oh, that was entertaining. You bring people to a grappling match that have no idea of what they're watching, and it's boring to them. Now, obviously, that's on the commentators, you know, and enlightening and trying to educate the audience of what's going on. But I think that as a promoter, I get it. It sells more tickets to watch guys knock each other out than it does to see guys submit. So I think as fighters, we also see that. And so that why the trend has gone that direction, where there's a reward for, you know, banging it out and just, you know, just biting down your mouthpiece and throwing punches. And so that's why you see such a drift in that direction. And learning grappling moves is hard. It takes a lot more technique. When I coach people, I have a much easier time explaining how to throw a jab and how to step and step off line than I do having to explain how to do, you know, a choke. Because it's like, okay, well, you're going to have to feel the adjustment here on the head and arm. Okay, well, the person moves this way. This guy's head shaped this way. This guy's head shaped that way. Because you're connecting two bodies together, there's a lot more compensations and adjustments that have to be made. It's much more of a chess match, a thinking man's sport. And so it's easier if you're a good athlete, you know. Like, I saw something, someone sent me a screenshot. I think Lewis was making a joke about, you know, jiu-jitsu isn't real to stand up. I'm like, well, yeah, well, not everybody can be 6'4" and 280, you know, and throw, you know, and be gifted. But, you know, so if you don't have those attributes, how are you going to win fights? You go grappling, you know, and if you do have those attributes, which he's faced a couple guys now that have taken him down and choked him out, it even makes you that much more superior. So I think that the reason why we don't see it that much is, again, it's difficult to learn. It's much easier to, you know, the time frame to be able to just strap up and throw punches is much shorter than a guy jumping in and wrestling and doing grappling.
Have you given any thought to your legacy in the sport, what you want it to be, what you believe it to be, what it is?
No, not too much. I think it is the science of martial arts. I just like to push, you know, I mean, going out there, like, especially now in coaching, I get to explain, like, okay, well, why do you throw the jab this direction? Why do you put your weight here? Why does that set up the elbow this direction? Why does that open up the hips here? Why does this do this? Why do you expose here? So just pushing that part, I'm very much in love with. So I think sometimes I'm so immersed with that sit back and kind of think of, like, well, what am I bringing to the world? It's like, well, I don't know, but I love doing this every day, you know, and I get to go and train people and hang out, and we talk about fighting every day. We sit on the ground, like, well, hey, did you see the ghost escape? I'm like, well, yeah, well, hold on, you know. If I coached Chris Angel, one of my students, you know, just yesterday. He's like, oh, have you seen him? He was showing me his choke because he loves going on the internet and seeing different moves. So, have you ever seen this? I'm like, yeah, it's called a buggy choke. He's like, yeah. I'm like, well, here, lay down. Let me show you. Do you ever use it? I'm like, well, I don't, because of MMA purposes. This is why. You know, I'm like, in a pure grappling match, yeah. If the other guy could pick you up and slam you on the back of your head, no. You know what I mean? Like, you know, and so I guess maybe my legacy right now, even just, you know, speaking out loud or hearing myself speak, you know, is bringing a much more complete game of MMA where jiu-jitsu and boxing and wrestling all really mold to each other. I think too many people have just specialized and divided. And even now, sometimes in the striking range, you know, like sometimes I watch MMA fights, it just looks like bad kickboxing, you know, whereas I like the idea of being able to envelop where you see guys that are able to kick, punch, shoot on each other, take each other down. You know, a Demetrius Johnson type of fight.
Frank,
Sorry,
you're
go
going to
ahead,
be
Steve.
closing out your great career under the UFL banner, your daughter on the card. But I heard you mention some really key points if you follow the MMA headlines these days about fighter treatment and what that promotion can bring. How realistic is all the things that we know this sport needs, all the things that Francis Ngannou mentioned and why he wanted to leave the UFC recently? How realistic across the board in the UFL and elsewhere can we see that happen without some type of major work stoppage?
I think all you do is have to give people a alternative. If you look at any industry in the world, if anybody complains about, well, I think that the automobile industry is this, or I think that this, sector is this, the minute you give somebody a better alternative, they can go another route. That's why, obviously monopolies are illegal, because they realize, well, they stunt the growth of a section or a sector of industry. Because if you have somebody who can just sit there and avoid competition. So by going out there and giving a legitimate competitive alternative that actually is legitimate is, I think, really the step in fixing this. I think I've heard people talk about doing unions. I look at the practicality of that actually occurring, and I just don't see it very high. Right now, I see that what Harrison Rogers is doing with the UFL is actually to be very high. Somebody who's already wealthy, who isn't really trying to do this to make a living. Basically, Harrison doesn't want to lose what he's, the fortune that he's created. But at the same time, sit there and go, okay, I don't need to, this isn't for me to get rich. This is for me to give back to the sport that I am also a fan of and help. And obviously, not go backwards financially, but then I can open up the doors and show that, okay, well, now if you're sharing more with the fighters, if you're, for example, already is overheads more just by doing the insurance, having all of our fighters insured the minute they come in and fight. And that's because Quentin, myself, we sit there and we talk to him like, what are some of the complaints you have? I'm like, well, here's something. Fighters in most of the leagues deal with this all the time. You sit there and you go, wow, that guy showed up to the fight, he was injured. Why did he do that? I'm like, well, because they'll pay for the surgery if he makes it to the fight. I'm all, wouldn't it be nice if the guy had insurance leading up to the fight the whole time, whether he had, just whatever injury he had, even if it was minor, he would then go to the doctor, get it checked out. And maybe it's something that could be addressed through some physical therapy, some rest, ice, to stay, man, lay off of this, and it won't be so severe, instead of hiding this. And then in the next 8 weeks, you make it so bad that now it is only way to fix the surgery. So that alone is just one thing that we've tried to fix and see that as a problem, and have been able to do so. It's no longer now just like, hey, this is what we're going to do. It's actually reality.
Frank, if you were king of MMA for a day, one day, and you can make one change, what would it be? Could be to the industry, could be to the rule set, anything.
Oh, well, yeah, there's rule sets I'd like to change. I think on the promotion side, I'd make it completely apparent, like, for example, like you have a league that goes out there, whatever they make, it has to be shown, what I mean? Like, there is no hiding, there's no assumptions of what they give the fighters, of what they're making. I think clarity would help out. And obviously there's people that don't like that idea, because, it's just like the whole idea that, like, if I get a phone call, someone says, hey, Frank, we're going to need you to come out here and do an autograph section. Oh, okay, cool. And Quentin or somebody I know, Tito, Randy's been there before. Like, hey, man, what are you making? They tell me. So then I know, okay, this company is about this level, this gauge. So I have an idea. Now, in most places, most business owners look down on that. Which they'll try to make it seem it's illegal to do so, but don't talk about what you made. Don't say this. And then fighters don't understand what to ask for. Like, well, until they release the show money, but I don't know what backdoor money this guy's making, because the less knowledge you have, the less you can really make an argument for what you deserve or earn. So I think clarity in the sport would be the one thing I bring. So a promotion could have, and then that being said, I guess to add on to the share of what the fighters make compared to what the promotion, I would like to do more like what the NFL does, where there's a certain percentage of what the company, the promotion is allowed to take, and the rest has to go back to the fighters.
I think it'd be change that is long overdue. Obviously, it will be August 12th. It will be Frank Mir on the card. We don't know yet the opponent. His daughter, Bella Mir, will be on the card. It'll be cornering each other. They'll be fighting on the same card. It's a hell of a moment in your career, Frank. We are glad we got the opportunity to talk to you about it now. You've had one unbelievable career, whether, maybe you're satisfied with certain portions of it, but certainly from the spectator side, man, we got a lot, and we're really appreciative of it, and can't wait to see what happens on August 12th.
All right. Thank you, guys.